good game for Green Bay. They look impressive. They look like the team to beat right now in their division. We'll see how the Eagles do against Kansas City to see if it could be Green Bay and Eagles coming down for the NFC title. All right, welcome to this episode of Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and we're going to continue on looking at the preview of Week 2 games. We've covered half of them, and if you missed it, it was in the previous podcast I did yesterday. I covered I believe, the first 9 or 10 games, and I'm going to pick up with the rest of the games. But before we do that, we will take a look at the Thursday night game between the Washington Commanders and the Green Bay Packers. Now, in this game, I predicted that Green Bay would win, and I did think, though, it would be a close game. And I actually thought if it was in Washington, I would have maybe picked the Commanders. But I did pick Green Bay, but it was not close. Green Bay won this game 27-18, and it wasn't even that close. I think Green Bay seemed to be able to do whatever they wanted on offense, and they definitely controlled Jaden Daniels the entire game. So it was really a rough game for the Commanders, and Green Bay looked as good as they did last week, I thought. So let's take a look at it a little bit here. Looking at the quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels was 24 for 42 with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. The only thing is those touchdowns came late. The entire game, he was really bottled up. And for fantasy purposes, he almost reached the numbers you would be hoping for as far as his fantasy outlook goes. But it was a rough game for him. And when you look at what the Packers did, they just shut him down on his rushing, and we'll look at that in a minute. But they also made it so hard for him to throw the ball down the field. He had to get rid of the ball quickly almost the entire game. And when you're looking at his stats, like I said, 24 for 42, no interceptions. Looking at the stats, passes over 20 yards, 0 for 4. He couldn't complete anything over 20 yards. If you go to over 10 yards, 3 completions on 11 attempts. So basically, he spent the entire night throwing passes 10 or less yards. And that was all that the Packers needed. They just continually shut them down. Commanders had no running game. And it was just a difficult night for the Commanders all around. Now, but when you're looking at Jordan Love, what a contrast. And he only threw 31 passes. He had 19 completions for 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. So did a lot more with the passes. And you can see this when you're looking at the where these passes went. So unlike Daniels, who was 0 for 4 over 20 yards, Love was 2 out of 7. So he did complete 2 passes over 20 yards, and they're long passes as well. But then over 10 yards, just between 10 and 20 yards, he was 7 out of 9, 7 out of 8, or 7 out of 9, I'm sorry. 7 out of 9. Let me get this right. 7 out of 8. 7 out of 8 versus Jaden Daniels, who was 3 out of 7. So he was much better over passes over 10 yards. It really was a completely different game. And they Love just continually found guys open outside of 10 yards. And then within 10 yards, he was almost flawless as well. So they had Commanders defense could not stop Love. He just seemed to be able to throw when he wanted, where he wanted. When looking at the running backs again, Josh Jacobs was 23 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. So average-wise, not that great, but he seemed to be no different than Love as far as how he can move. he was able to get open. I mean, he was able to run when he wanted to. And it was later in the game when they're running the clock that kind of shifted his stats to put him under less than 4 yards carry. But prior to that, he really did seem to run when he wanted to. When you're looking at the Commanders, Austin Eckler had 8 carries for 17 yards. So terrible. Daniels had 7 carries for 17 yards. And Krosky Merritt had 4 carries for 17 yards. So he had a little bit better, but they were playing from behind this whole game. So really Eckler was in there until he got hurt. And we'll have to see what his status is. It could be serious for him. But they really bottled up Daniels. They had an eye on him the entire time. He could never really take off. He had no long runs of any length. So it was just a tough game for him all the way around. Now, when we're looking at the receivers for both teams, it was primarily the tight ends, though I wouldn't have necessarily thought that. And if you listen to what I said about the Packers worry me because you just don't know who's catching passes. But looking at first at the Commanders, Zach Ertz, tight end, with 6 receptions on 8 targets for 64 yards and a touchdown. So not a bad game for him. He did seem to be able to get open when they could get to the ball to him. And because he was catching passes less than 10 yards, he did have a good game. When you're looking at Noah Brown, bad game, 1 catch on 4 attempts on 4 targets for 9 yards. And he dropped a pass that he really should have caught. And this would have been one over, well, definitely over 10, probably over 20 yards. But he dropped it. It was not good at all. And then McLaurin, hoping for a better game out of him than last week, and it was slightly, but nothing really great at all. You're really starting to worry if you have McLaurin on your fantasy team. 5 catches in 9 targets. So he was targeted the most in this game, but he only had 5 catches for 48 yards. So it was just a rough game for him. No touchdowns either for him either. Now, Deebo Samuel, he had a decent game, 7 catches on 8 targets, only 44 yards, but he was catching these short passes, which ended up in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, where he was catching some balls. And his 1 touchdown, he did have a touchdown on a short pass. It was less than 10 yards, but he caught it almost at the scrimmage line, and it was all Deebo Samuel's forcing his way into the end zone. So it was really a good run on his part to get in. He's really been a nice outlet for Daniels, and I think this is just going to be something continues. So he may not rack up a lot of yards, but he is getting the receptions. And when he gets near the end zone, he's somebody they're looking at every time. Now, looking at the receivers for Green Bay, again, it was the tight end, Tucker Kraft, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 124 yards. Huge game for him. 1 touchdown. And unlike Zach Ertz, he was down the field. He was catch. I don't know what the plan was to cover him, but they didn't do a very good job of it. And even the other tight end, Luke Musgrave, had 2 catches on 2 targets for 32 yards. So the tight ends had a huge game. Looking at some of the other ones, Dobbs, 3 catches for 28 yards on 5 targets, 1 touchdown though. So that kind of saved his game. Golden had no catches. He had 1 long pass that he was open, just couldn't get it to him. And then Wicks, 4 catches on 6 targets for 44 yards. So again, this is what scares me every time about Green Bay and picking any of the receivers, except for Dobbs had only 3 catches. Fortunately, he had a touchdown, which saved him in fantasy. But Kraft right now looks like the one guy that you might want to choose. He did have a good game, 7 targets. He was targeted the most in this particular game. Wicks was next as far as targets go, but only had 44 yards and no touchdowns. So it's just something that you always have to consider when you're just talking about Love himself. Obviously, he had a good game if you had him as your quarterback. So other than that, though, Love did have 3 carries for 12 yards along with his 292 yards passing. So he had a good game as far as fantasy goes. Now, when we're looking at the defense, let me just throw in here, as far as the Packers go, one player, when we're looking at these career numbers, the top 10, I like to look at who's some of the greatest players on a team. Currently, Rashawn Gary just tied for 10th all-time in tackles for loss for the Green Bay Packers. He's now got 41 tackles for loss. Next up for him is Preston Smith, who was on the team last year, had ended up with 42 tackles for loss. So that's next up for Rashawn Gary as far as moving up into the 9th position overall. Clay Matthews is miles away with 121 tackles for loss. So pretty impressive there. There's really nobody for the Commanders that did anything currently that to talk about as far as career type stats or anything like that. But looking at defensive game here, well, Micah Parsons had a half a sack again, so he's going to continue to just be somebody you have to watch continually. And like I said, Gary did have the tackle for loss. He had a good game, 1 sack, 2 tackles, and a 1 tackle assist. So he had a good game there. So those are some of your players there. Let's look at the overall numbers for this game. Green Bay, like I said, dominated. Total net yards, Green Bay had 404 total net yards to 230 for Washington. And like I said, Washington got a lot of those yards in the fourth quarter when they're just trying to play comeback, and Green Bay was kind of trying to force the clock to run out. It was really, this was a game dominated by Green Bay all the way around. They dominated with the ball. They had the ball for 32 and a half minutes to 27 and a half for Washington. So again, a good game for Green Bay. They look impressive. They look like the team to beat right now in their division. We'll see how the Eagles do against Kansas City to see if it could be Green Bay and Eagles coming down for the NFC title at this point anyway. All right, that's that game. Let's look at the games coming up now. First one, we're going to look at the Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens, unfortunately, they had that terrible loss. They're 0-1. We'll look at the home team first. They're favored. Baltimore's favored by 11.5 points. This is incredible. And it's interesting to think about it, whether they'll be able to cover 11.5 points. Cleveland's got a good defense, which they definitely showed against Cincinnati. Can they do that twice? Against the Ravens, are playing a different type of team, though. Not a passing game as much as it is a running game. Looking at some of the all-time great players, Lamar Jackson still number 2. He'll stay number 2 all-time rushing for the team. He's all-time leader in rushing as far as quarterbacks go in the entire NFL. But he'll have to go at least another year, probably maybe 2, to catch Jamal Lewis to be the number 1 guy. But Derrick Henry already, only into his second year, beginning his second year, is already number 7 all-time rushing for the Baltimore Ravens, and he only needs 13 yards to pass Priest Holmes for 6th all-time. Derrick Henry has 2,090 yards, so definitely going to see him move past Priest Holmes on his game on this weekend. And Derrick Henry in the NFL is 6th all-time in touchdowns rushing with 108. He only needs 2 to tie Walter Payton for 5th and 3 to move into 5th all-time by himself. And he is on a pace to possibly, depending on how many years he plays, to catch Emmitt Smith, who has 164 rushing TDs. We'll see. Looking at some of the defensive stats, Marlon Humphrey needs 1 interception to tie Rod Woodson for 5th all-time for the Baltimore Ravens in interceptions. Humphrey has 19, Woodson has 20, so he needs 1 to tie, 2 to move into 5th all-time by himself. The great Ed Reed had 61 interceptions in his career. Now, tackles for loss, Nnamdi Madubukuki, sorry if I slaughtered that, but he's got 41 tackles for loss. He needs 1 to tie Michael McCrary to move into a tie for 10th, 2 to pass him, and with 2, he'd tie C.J. Mosley for 9th all-time. So he's got a couple of people in the horizon as far as tackles for loss go. One more very good one here is Lamar Jackson only needs 4 points, so 1 touchdown run for him this weekend, and he moves into 8th all-time in scoring for the Baltimore Ravens. He's got 206 points. He would pass Willis McGahee, the running back, who had 210 points. So looking to move into 8th all-time in the scoring department. Obviously, this is dominated by a kicker, Justin Tucker, who had his issues and is no longer with the team, but he had 1,775 points, one of the best all-time there. All right. Looking at the fantasy outlook for this game, definitely starting Lamar Jackson, number 1 quarterback in fantasy. Now, Joe Flacco, I think he had a really good game last week. He had 2 interceptions. Neither one was his fault. His wide receivers the ball hit their hands, bounced up in the air, and the defender caught the ball. So he's only projected 12 points, but definitely somebody you could see do a lot better than that. Derrick Henry, you're definitely starting for sure. So Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry could have a really big game again. He had a huge game last week. So you're definitely starting them. He's running back number 8, which I think is too low for him. He could be one of this coming out of this weekend, number 1 running back, or in the top 3 for sure. Some of the other players you want to think about playing, Dylan Sampson for Cleveland, the running back. Judkins, I don't think will be playing, and even if he did, he'd be playing very little. He showed much better than Ford in last week's game, and he can catch a few passes. So he's somebody, if you want, you might try to start him. Not somebody I'm excited about. Zay Flowers had a huge game last week. I still don't want to start him. For me, I want to see this as the guy they're going to go to, and it very well may be the guy, because Mark Andrews had 1 catch for 5 yards. Is this the way the game's going to go now, where they're going to not focus so much on the tight ends? And Zay Flowers will be the guy consistently. I'd wait and see. He's been a kind of a more of a boom or bust, and he had a boom game last week, so kind of worried about the bust this week, especially if they get into a big lead and they don't need to throw to him. Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, 2 wide receivers for Cleveland. I like them to some degree. Jerry Jeudy or Cedric Tillman is a good 3rd wide receiver or flex guy for you. Definitely not somebody you're starting, but as 1 or 2 wide receiver, but definitely good chance that they have good games this weekend. Rashad Bateman, I'm not starting. If I'm not going to start Flowers, I'm definitely not going to start Bateman unless I have to. Now, the tight ends, Njoku was somebody that going into the season was a player that looked like a good pickup. But now with Harold Fannin on the scene, he seems to be the guy that has a lot more oomph to his game when he's catching some passes. So I don't know. I'm a little worried. A lot of people are jumping on the Fannin bandwagon after last week, but he's tight end 24. Njoku's tight end 7. I really don't want to play either one at this point unless I see that Fannin is the guy they're going to start switching and going to more than Njoku. For all we know, Flacco could pick out Njoku this week, so I don't want to take either one. As far as the defenses go, Ravens defense is number 1. Definitely somebody you might want to play against the Browns, though Flacco is a good quarterback. So wrapping it up, you're definitely starting Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, probably Jerry Jeudy, and Zay Flowers as your 3rd wide receiver or flex guy. David Njoku, I wouldn't start him. I'm picking this game that the Ravens do after that loss last week. That was a rough loss. They should not have lost that game. I'm picking the Ravens to cover the spread and win the game 27-10. I think they'll dominate. Next game, game 11, or for me, Carolina Panthers at Arizona Cardinals. The Panthers lead this series 15-6. So They pretty well dominated this, but Arizona Cardinals are favored by 6.5. That's quite a surprise. That's a big margin for the Arizona Cardinals, I should say. They are 1-0, though. Now, looking at some of their all-time numbers, a -1, Kyler Murray. Now, he was this way last week, too, so he had no interceptions last week. But right now, he's just behind Kurt Warner. Kyler Murray's thrown 57 interceptions in his career with the Cardinals. Kurt Warner had 59, so who's 7th place right now. So he's looking at Kurt Warner as the guy he's going to pass as far as interceptions go. In the running department, James Conner is 4th all-time for the Cardinals in rushing, behind Jim Otis, who played in the 70s. Jim Otis had 3,863 yards. James Conner would have to have a big game because he's got 3,707. So he would have to have 157 yards to pass Jim Otis. Probably not likely, but it is a possibility. Looking at defense, just to say that for the Cardinals, Calais Campbell's their all-time active leader in tackles for loss with 107. And in the NFL, he's number 3 all-time with 187. So he's a great player for them. Looking at the Carolina Panthers as far as all-time players, Chuba Hubbard is moving up the list in rushing yards. He's 6th all-time right now. Deshaun Foster's 5th with 3,336 yards. So Chuba Hubbard needs 105 yards in this game. I think he can do that. He's been one of the better running backs in the last few years, and I think he could have a good game. He would move into 5th all-time for the Carolina Panthers in the rushing department. All right, that's pretty much all as far as those numbers go. Now, looking at the fantasy outlook on this game, Kyler Murray, a lot of talk, but he could have a good game against the Carolina Panthers. I wouldn't. If you have some options, I want to see it. He didn't have as big a game as I was hoping last week, and we'll see if he has a better game this week. Bryce Young, you don't want to start. He just looked okay, but he's not somebody you're going to want to start. I'm definitely going to start James Conner and Chuba Hubbard. They're both right there together. James Conner is running back 11. Hubbard's running back 13. So they're both really good running backs. Whether they're your first running back, probably often they're more like your second running back. But they're both I think, going to have good games. Now, Trey Benson's somebody you might want to stash on your bench right now to see how much of the carries he's going to take away from Conner. That's the only question mark with Conner, but this was said last year. But I think Conner will have a good game and throw in a touchdown in that. Now, when it comes to the wide receivers, Marvin Harrison, I think he looked better. And if this would help Kyler Murray as much as Marvin Harrison, but Marvin Harrison is getting open and Kyler Murray is not getting him the ball enough. So we'll see if that changes, if they can watch the film and Murray can see that this guy, Marvin Harrison, he looked good, better than I thought he did last year. And he does, regardless of anything you might say, Marvin Harrison seems to be able to find the end zone when they get near there. So I'm starting him at least as my second wide receiver. He's wide receiver 21. And for Carolina, Tetairoa McMillan is wide receiver 29. He's definitely the guy for Carolina right now. Xavier Legette has been a bust. I think he's just not. I don't know what his problem is. I listening to some of the Carolina Panther information, he doesn't seem to have his head in the game is the problem. And so if you're the quarterback, Bryce Young, you're going to lean on McMillan. And so I expect him to have a decent game. And I would definitely, and I know he's a rookie, but I'd definitely be starting him in my lineup if you have the room for him as at least your second receiver, if not just a flex guy. Now, the other person you're definitely starting is the tight end for Arizona, Trey McBride. Huge. You're always going to start him. He should have a good game. Now, the defense, Arizona Cardinals has been a sneaky good defense. So I would definitely think about starting them against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina's traveling out to Arizona. This could be a rough game again for the Carolina Panthers. Talking a little bit more about McMillan, I really do like him, and it'll be interesting to watch him and the wide receiver for Tampa Bay and see how these two rookies do. But in last week's game, McMillan played in 82% of the offensive snaps. He was targeted 9 times, had 118 yards, air yards, but he only had 68 receiving yards. So there was the opportunity to even have a better game than he did. So, I'm really looking at that connection between Bryce Young and Millen to continue to grow. I just think he's going to be the guy that he's going to be thrown to all the time. So, his target share was 27%. That's actually very good, and I think it's going to be higher than that. So he's somebody you're going to want to play. So the lineup locks for sure. I'm starting Murray maybe. Probably I want to wait another week if I have a better option. James Conner for sure. Chuba Hubbard, yes. Tedero McMillan, yes. Marvin Harrison, yes. And Trey McBride, definitely. And I do think the Arizona Cardinals are going to dominate in this game and win 26-13. Next game, Denver Broncos at the Indianapolis Colts. This series is tied 15-15. So this will be a game to see who ends up leading the series going into the following years. Broncos are favored by only 1.5 points, but it is in Indianapolis, so that says something that they're favored. And it will be an interesting game to watch because of the fact the Colts dominated the Miami Dolphins. And is Miami that bad of a team, or is Indianapolis just that good of a team? So it's kind of an interesting thing to watch. We'll see which way it is. And Denver obviously has a good team. Looking at some of the all-time greats, Michael Pittman has number 7 all-time in receptions for the Indianapolis Colts now. He's tied for 6th, actually, with 411. He won't catch probably Dallas Clark this week, who has 427 receptions for 5th all-time. But Michael Pittman, that's his next target. And he should catch him, whether it won't be this week, but next week or the week after, and he'll move into 5th. So he's moving up the list all time. Long way from Marvin Harrison, who had 1,102 receptions. Now, looking at this defense, this is a young and incredible defense here when it comes to tackles for loss. You have a lot of players who are within close to the top 10. So that's pretty interesting. Some teams you don't have anybody or maybe one guy. Here you have several players who are pushing their way up into the top 10. Now, granted, it's all in the bottom half of the top 10, but still they are there. And that includes Grover Stewart, Kenny Moore, and then Kwity Paye and Tyquan Lewis. So we'll be watching all of them as they push their way. Paye and Lewis need to have Paye is already tied for 10th, and Lewis has a few more to go to make it into the top 10. But Paye just needs 1 to tie for 9th all-time for the Colts and 2 to move into 9th by himself. So the other players, but we'll be watching them all year as they keep pushing up this list into the top 5 even. All right, looking at the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos. Sean Payton, with his win last week, tied Vic Fangio for 8th all-time in wins with 19. Next up for him is Lou Saban, who's 7th with 20 wins. So only needs another win this game here this weekend, and he moves into a tie for 7th. So he's got his way moving up the list. He won't catch Mike Shanahan probably ever, who had 138 wins. Looking at Cortland Sutton is another guy we're going to be watching. He moved into the top 10 last week in yards receiving, and now is number 10 by himself. And next up for him is Haven Moses, who played in the 70s and early 80s. Haven Moses has 5,450 yards receiving. Cortland Sutton has 5,401. So he only needs 50 yards to pass Moses to move into 9th all by himself. And then on defense, Nick Bonito is tied now with Champ Bailey with 32 tackles for loss. 1 now to tie Bradley Chubb to move into 9th, 2 to tie Shelby Harris to move into a tie for 8th. So we'll be watching to see if he can get 1 or 2 and continue to move up the list. Never going to probably catch unless Von Miller, who has 142 tackles for loss for Denver. All right, those are some of your players we'll be watching. Several players, for each team. Benito on defense for Denver, Cortland Sutton, the wide receiver, and then several of the defenders for the Colts, as well as Michael Pittman, another wide receiver. We'll be watching him as far as his receptions go. All right, looking at the fantasy outlook in this game, Bo Nix did not have a good game, and I wouldn't start him. I know he's been kind of popular, and I've been watching him too. I think he will be a good quarterback as long as he really gets a hang of the Peyton offense. I think he will be good, but this is not the I don't trust him at this point in time. We'll see how it goes. Daniel Jones should definitely not starting, even though he had a really good game last week, and he has the ability to run with the ball, but he's playing against Denver, and I wouldn't start most quarterbacks against Denver if you can help it, unless they're one of the elite guys. Jonathan Taylor, I don't know if he's going to meet his projected points. He's running back 16. They're going to try to give him the ball, and he's too good of a player to bench, so you're going to start him and just hope that he can break something or he's down near the end zone and can get a touchdown. For Denver, I don't want to start anybody. I want to start Harvey, but until Dobbins is not the lead running back, I'm not comfortable. I don't think Dobbins is any better than late second pick. If you got somebody better, I wouldn't even have him as your second running back. Right now he's running back 30. That's about right. I'd definitely be looking for somebody better. You just don't know right now how much time he's going to share with Harvey. Now, when it comes to wide receivers, Cortland Sutton's been having a good game, a good career, and I think he's got a good connection with Bo Nix. He's a little shaky for me, but he may be somebody you'd want to start. Right now, he's wide receiver 24. Michael Pittman, I think, if it was any other team other than Denver, I'd say start him. He's wide receiver 41. I think that's too low for him, except in this game. So I'd wait one more week before I really want to put him in. But I do think he's going to be the guy that Jones goes to on a regular basis. So if you want to take a chance, but when you're playing against Denver, it's just their defense dominates on the receivers, and it makes it hard to start any of them. The same goes for the tight ends. Now, if I had to start anybody for the Colts, it's probably Tyler Warren. He's number 6 tight end, because I think that Jones will be wanting to get rid of the ball quickly, and Warren could be the guy he goes to. Ingram, I don't know. We'll have to see how badly he's hurt, but he didn't produce as well as I thought he might. Now, you might want to start the Broncos defense. It's a 4th-ranked defense. Even the Colts, we'll see, against Denver. I want to see how this offense for Denver goes, but right now, I don't know if you'd want to start either one necessarily, but if I did, I'd start Denver's. The players I'm going to start regardless, Jonathan Taylor. I know it's a tough game, but I'm going to start him. Cortland Sutton and Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren's going to be a good tight end. All right. Looking at what I think overall, I think the Broncos end up winning this game despite it being in Indianapolis, 24-21. Next game, Philadelphia Eagles at Kansas City Chiefs. This is a big game, rematch of the Super Bowl. And interestingly, as far as their regular season series goes, they're tied at 6 apiece. So going to break that as well. Now, the Chiefs, to me, unbelievably are favored by 1. I guess because it's Kansas City, it's in Kansas City, and Kansas City has Mahomes. But we'll look at that. Kansas City's 0-1 right now. As far as Kansas City, there's really nobody career-wise we're looking at the moment. Mostly because Mahomes owns all the records as far as quarterback goes, and Kelsey owns all the records as far as receiving goes. So we're looking for some other things at this point in time. Looking at the Eagles, Dallas Goedert, tight end for that team, needs 7 catches, but he may not play, so we'll have to see on that. But he can move into tie for 9th all time in receptions for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's really it for this game. Now, when it comes to the game and fantasy, Jalen Hurts, you're starting for sure. He just has too many weapons, and he's too good on his own. You can question his passing game, but he's got too many good receivers to throw to, and he can run with the ball. So, and then he's very likely to get a touchdown rushing on his own. So you don't know how many touchdowns he's going to get every game, whether it's through the pass game. And for PPR, I'm definitely starting, or whether it's rushing it in himself. Now, Patrick Mahomes is somebody that, and I wouldn't start him. I know a lot of people just keep betting that he will come through, but Eagles have a good defense. They shut him down in the Super Bowl fairly well, and he just is having the Kansas City Chiefs, as far as receivers go, is rough. When now your Hollywood Brown is going to be your top wide receiver, what happens when they shut him down? It's going to make it hard. And Kelsey, can he pick up his game? He fortunately for him had a touchdown last week. Otherwise, he was nothing as far as the receiving goes. So I wouldn't want to start him. I just don't trust it, even though he's quarterback 6th. I find that amazing. And I think it's just because he's Patrick Mahomes, and we continue to believe that he can create miracles despite the fact that Eagles have pretty much everything that's going to help them dominate the game. Now, Saquon Barkley, definitely starting. Chiefs have a fairly good defense, and we'll see how good it really is anymore. But I wouldn't. Barkley did not have that great a game last week, so I expect to see him have a much better game. I'm not starting Isaiah Pacheco, though he's running back 34. I'm not going to start him or Kareem Hunt. They'll share time, and I don't like either one of them. Now, as far as the receivers go, this is one thing I am troubled with the Eagles. A.J. Brown, you want to start him. He should have a better game than he had last week. And then for Kansas City, it is Hollywood Brown. He's going to be the guy. So maybe just on pure numbers of receptions he gets in this game, he might be somebody you might want to throw in there. Eagles have such a good defense, though. If it was a different game, I might definitely want to start him. But in this game, kind of questionable. Right now, he's wide receiver 32. So he is somebody, maybe your second or your flex. Maybe in your flex spot, you might start him. Devontae Smith, again, he's wide receiver 36. He could be a flex guy at the best. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster could have a better game. He's wide receiver 52, but being the fact that now he's probably the second wide receiver behind Brown, could be a guy who catches some passes. The one, if you really want to take a shot on, is Tyquan Thornton. He looked good. He's fast. You can pick him up almost anywhere in most of the leagues. His wide receiver 66. He could have a big game because I think if he catches a ball, he has a chance to break it. Travis Kelce's wide receiver 3. I'm not sure I want to start him. I just don't trust it. I'm going to wait on him. So as far as people, I'm definitely starting Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, anybody else, only if I have to. I don't know that I want to start Patrick Mahomes, unless, of course, they are behind and he has to throw a lot to try to get out of that. He ran a lot more last week, and see, that's a problem too. Is it because he can't find anybody open, which I think is the problem? But Hollywood Brown, maybe a flex guy, and same with Devontae Smith. I do think the Eagles are going to dominate this game 27-17. That's a big score. We'll see if it pans out that way. Atlanta Falcons at the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota leads this series 22-12. The Vikings are favored by 3.5, and it is a home game for them. So let's look at some of the numbers. Justin Jefferson is moving up the list. He's 4th all-time in receiving yards for Minnesota, behind number 3, Anthony Carter, who played in the 80s and 90s. Now, Justin Jefferson has 7,476 yards, and Anthony Carter has 7,636. So he does have to have a big game here, and he could against that Atlanta defense, especially considering he didn't have much of a game last week. Fortunately for him, he had a touchdown reception, but other than that, it was somewhat of a rough game until that last quarter last week. But he needs 161 yards, which is definitely something he could do. But if he doesn't catch Carter this week, I think he will next week to move into third all-time by himself. Looking at the Atlanta Falcons, Bijan Robinson needs one touchdown rushing to tie Lynn Kane for 10th all-time with 19. Hopefully he gets that this week for him. That's it as far as all-time players on the top 10 list. Now looking at the quarterbacks, I like Penix, and I think he's going to have another big game, and I think he's going to have a big game. He's somebody who's been sneaky. He's quarterback 24, but you might want to start him depending on what your quarterback situation is, especially if you had Purdy or something like that and he's not playing. Penix might be an option for you. McCarthy, quarterback 19. I want to wait a week. Maybe the fact that he hadn't played a real game until last week, so it's his first game. He looked horrible the first half and came through, though, in basically the fourth quarter, but in the second half, he improved his play quite a bit. So does that carry over into the next game? I think I will wait and see on that. But he's somebody you can pick up if you want to maybe put him on your bench and see how he does this week. Definitely starting Robinson, running back 3. He's obviously somebody I'm starting. Now for Minnesota, you've got Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, running backs 25 and 29, though Jordan Mason rushed the ball more than Aaron Jones did. But Aaron Jones catches more. So if I'm going to start either one of these, it's going to be Jordan Mason. I think he's the guy that's going to play a lot more. But I hate split backfield, so if I have the option, I'm probably not going to play either one if I don't have to. Definitely starting Justin Jefferson for Minnesota, and I'm starting Drake London. I think that Penix is going to be peppering London, and I think London will have a good game. That's about it. TJ Hawkinson's tight end 4. Probably, I don't know. May start him, especially right now, I guess, when the receiving core is a little depleted for the Minnesota, when you have your other wide receivers, Thielen. Hawkinson could have a good game. And for Kyle Pitts for Atlanta, we'll see how he goes. Like I said before, Penix has really been building him up. They are throwing him the ball instead of down the field. They're throwing him the ball in shorter passes and then giving him the option to run, which is a lot better for Kyle Pitts. So he could actually, in PPR, have a pretty decent game. And I do think that Atlanta will be trying to keep up with Minnesota in this game. So Kyle Pitts would be an option as well. So for sure, I'm starting Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Drake London. And I probably would start, even if I had the options, Pitts over Hawkinson. But either way, Hawkinson should have a good game as well. And I am looking for the Vikings to win this game, but in a high-scoring game, 32-27. All right, next game, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Houston Texans. Houston leads this series 5-1. Houston is favored by 2.5 points. So interesting there. It is at Houston, so that probably explains most of the reason they're favored. Houston is 0-1 right now. And looking at some of the players, Nico Collins is 7th all-time in receptions behind Brandon Cooks. Nico Collins has 221 receptions. Cooks has 228. So Nico Collins needs 7 catches in this game. And I think he can get it if Stroud can get him the ball, because I think they're going to have to keep up with Tampa Bay, even though I do believe Houston has a good defense. Looking on the defense, Derek Stingley had a good game last week, but no interceptions. But he needs 1 interception to tie Andre Hall, 4th all-time in interceptions for the Houston Texans, with only 12. Stingley has 11, and Hall has 12. The leader is Jonathan Joseph with 17 interceptions. This is the lowest number in any team in the NFL as far as who is number one in interceptions with only 17. So one team, and I always talk about this, that the interception record for each team or in the career-wise is extremely hard to break because you don't see defenders having as many interceptions year after year that you saw in the past. But this is one team where it's possible when the leader only has 17. So we'll see how currently Derek Stingley does. Looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield is making his move on this team. He passed Trent Dilfer all-time in touchdown passes last week to move into 6 by himself, and now next up for him is Doug Williams. Doug Williams is 5th with 73 touchdown passes. Baker Mayfield has 72. So 1 to tie, 2 to pass Doug Williams to move into 5th all by himself. Jameson Winston, number 1 with 121 touchdown passes. So give Baker Mayfield 3-4 years, and I think he has a chance. Looking at one other stat here, a couple other stats. Lavonte David needs 1 tackle for loss to tie 3 players for 6th all-time in the NFL. So he would tie Von Miller as well, who's already tied for 6th. But Lavonte David has 170 tackles for loss. He needs 1 to move into a tie for 6th all-time in the NFL. Great player. And then finally, Mike Evans is already the lead. One of those few teams where somebody other than a kicker is the all-time leading scorer for the team. But Mike Evans has 644 points. That's the all-time lead. Now, currently, Chase McLaughlin, the kicker for the team, is 10th all-time with 269 points. He needs 7 points to tie James Wilder for 9th, running back there, and then 8 to move into a lead all by himself for 9th all-time. So give him a few years if he can continue to be a good kicker, and he could catch Mike Evans at some point. This is a close game. We'll see, because it is in Houston, so we'll see. Looking at the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, do you want to start him? I like Baker Mayfield. I like starting him, and I love the wide receiver. So somebody I'm thinking about starting. He's quarterback number 10. Stroud is quarterback 17. I don't want to start Stroud. He gets sacked too much, and I just don't trust him. Looking at the running backs, Bucky Irving, I'm going to start. He's running back 12. I think he'll have a decent game, and Stroud may dump some passes off to him, which would be very helpful for Bucky Irving in PPR. Nick Chubb, I'm not starting Nick Chubb. He's running back 32. He could have a decent game if Houston gets into the lead and they can just run the ball. He didn't look half bad, but if they're behind, he's not even going to be on the field much because he just doesn't catch passes. So I don't want to play him unless somehow I have to. Looking at the wide receivers, you're definitely going to start Nico Collins. And whereas I don't want to start Stroud, I do feel like at least he can hit Nico Collins enough times that Nico Collins can have a good game and live up to his wide receiver 7 status. Now, Mike Evans is wide receiver 20, and Emeka Egbuka is wide receiver 23. If I have my choice, I'm sticking with Egbuka. I like Evans. He does catch a lot of touchdown passes. But to me, Egbuka was very impressive, and I think that I can see why Baker Mayfield may throw the ball his way as often as he can. So those 2 wide receivers, very good for the team. It really is amazing that they picked up Egbuka and they had to know that Chris Godwin wasn't going to start the season, because you've got Egbuka, and right now with Godwin out, he's starting for sure. And then Evans is getting older, and Evans usually misses at least 1 game. So then if Evans can stay on the team and not get hurt until Godwin gets back, and then, Egbuka could fill in for Evans. So I really like that guy. Christian Kirk could be a sneaky player if he's playing. A slot guy could catch a few passes, especially when the fact that Stroud often has to dump the ball off because, well, I don't know. He gets sacked regularly, so he likes to throw the ball down the field, but he could dump some passes off to Kirk. Now, looking at the tight ends, Dalton Schultz could be a sneaky guy for you. Cade Otton, again, sneaky, but very infrequent. You just don't know when they're going to have a game, so I wouldn't want to start them. Probably not going to start either defense, even though the Buccaneers might be one you think about, just because they have the opportunity to get to Stroud. So for people, I'm definitely starting Bucky Irving, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, and Emeka Ibuka, and I would start Baker Mayfield as well if I have him. I think he should have a good game. And despite the game being in Houston, I'm picking the Buccaneers to win this 21-17. Kind of a low-scoring game because I do think Houston has a good defense, a really good defense, really. All right, Los Angeles Chargers at the Las Vegas Raiders. This is the late Monday night game. And so there is 2 Monday night games. I forgot to mention that. So that'll be fun. The first one is that Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Houston, Texas game. That'll be the first Monday night game. And then you'll have the Chargers at the Raiders. The Raiders lead this series 69-60 with 2 ties. And though it's in Las Vegas, the Chargers are favored by 3.5. So that's a big spread for an away game. The Raiders are 1-0. Looking at them again, as far as all-time players, and that's Max Crosby. He just continues to move up the list as far as sacks and tackles for loss. But in this case, we're looking at the sacks. Right now, he's 5th all-time for the Raiders in sacks with 60.5. He needs 1 to tie Ike Lassiter, who played in the 60s, as well as so did Ben Davidson, who has 62. Ike Lassiter has 61.5. Davidson has 62. So Max Crosby needs 1 or 1.5 to tie these 2 guys. 2, he moves into 3rd all-time by himself. And then he'll be looking at Greg Townsend, who's number 1 all-time with 107.5. It'll be a while before he gets up to there. As far as the Chargers go, there's really nobody except the kicker and Keenan Allen interesting in scoring. Right now, the kicker is 11th all-time. Keenan Allen is 10th all-time. Keenan Allen has 370 points scored. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, has 366. So they're fighting it out. But you know the kicker ultimately is going to pass Allen to move into 10th and push Allen out of there. But they both could pass Dennis Partee, who's 9th all-time with 380 points. So we'll see. But you know the kickers usually over time can pass any offensive player. All right, let's look at this game. Justin Herbert, I liked him, and he looked good last week. And if they continue to pass the ball the way they did, Herbert's somebody you're going to want to start. He's quarterback number 9 right now, but I think he could move into the top 5 easy. He runs the ball well when he takes off, and he takes off at the right time. So he's somebody that I did not put up here to begin the season because I worry too much that the Chargers run the ball and just that's all they want to do. But Herbert looked so good last week against the Chiefs. Now, Geno Smith is quarterback 22. He had a big game passing last week, and I think this could be something you see every week. So he's somebody I wouldn't feel bad about starting. Chargers do have a good defense, but I think they'll be playing from behind. I'm talking about the Raiders. So he's somebody you might think about starting. And again, like I said, if your quarterback's out like Purdy, you might want to start Smith. Looking at the running backs, definitely starting Ashton Genty. Didn't really have that great of a game last week, but it was his first game, and he's running back number 10. I definitely am starting him. I think he'll just improve, get the first game jitters out, and see how he does out of the backfield catching passes. Now for the Chargers, Omarion Hampton, really good running back as well. 2 rookie running backs here. He's running back 15. He's somebody, not my starting. I'm definitely not starting him in the same fashion like my number one running back, but maybe my number two guy. I wouldn't mind starting him. Looking at the wide receivers, here's a problem. Ladd McConkey was picked much earlier than some of these other guys, and he's a good player. But Herbert really spread the ball around. So you have McConkey, Allen, and Johnston. Johnston had a lot of yards. Keenan Allen had a lot of important receptions at key moments and a touchdown pass. So I'm a little reluctant to start any one of these receivers just out of the fear of I don't know which one is going to produce ultimately. So maybe any one of them could be your flex player at best, I think. Now for the Raiders, Jacoby Myers is somebody you might think about starting. He's wide receiver 19, but he does not have the competition that McConkey has as far as receiving goes, except, of course, for Bowers. So he's somebody I would definitely think about starting, especially if they fall behind and they need to throw the ball. And Geno Smith is not afraid to throw this ball down the field, and that's great for Jacoby Myers. Looking at the tight ends, you're definitely starting Brock Bowers. You just pencil him in every week, no matter who they're playing against. So the lineup looks like this as far as who I'm going to definitely start, and that's Ashton Genty, Evan Hampton as my second running back. Jacoby Myers, I'll definitely start as my second wide receiver or flex guy. And then maybe Ladd McConkey as a flex guy, and definitely starting Brock Bowers. Now, this game is in Vegas, but I'm picking the Chargers to win this game 30-24. All right. That's a look at all the games. So I'm looking forward to this week to see how they pan out. I'll let you know how well I did in my forecasting, and we'll see how that goes. But I'll be back on Monday. Enjoy watching the games. On Monday, I'll give my post-game look at the games. So please like and subscribe to this podcast. You can do that in all your podcast outlets. Also on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. You can email me at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com if you have any comments. Appreciate that. And again, appreciate you listening. And that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So until next time, I'm out.